Hi, everybody, and welcome to Our Old Movies Good. I am your host, Ben Lewis, and today we are talking about All About Eve, a wonderful film. Diving right into it, really, starring Betty Davis and Baxter, and came out in 1950. Before I go too crazy, let's just throw it to Kevin. Kevin, what did you think about All About Eve?
It's a great movie. It's a classic movie. The dialogue was sharp. The characters, it was a true ensemble performance. Was very good, but it was highlighted by an amazing performance by Betty Davis.
You'd like to add to that, Eric? Contradict it?
So I'm kind of mixed on this movie. I think this movie encapsulates everything I hate about old movies. It really does. All in one film. It covers the gamut of issues I have with old movies. But there's a little piece of this movie I really liked, and there's a little piece of it that I think you can see in movies that have come out for the last 60, 70 years. But the presentation, it's boring. It's a boring movie. And that's my issue with all of these old movies. I'm glad we did this movie. First, when I was watching it an hour in, I was kind of mad that you guys made me watch this movie. I'm glad I watched it, but again, it's exactly why people have a hard time with old movies. It's boring. It's a boring movie.
How about instead of people, we say you, because I was not bored at all by this movie. Let me rephrase. I was slightly bored for about the first half hour or so, when I wasn't super into it. And then basically, right when Betty Davis's character, Margot Channing, comes in and says, "It's going to be a bumpy night." From that point on, I was engrossed, because the dialogue is so sharp and clever.
At the party?
Yes. She senses that shit's going to go down. She's feeling kind of antsy and angry, and she knows she's going to get pissed drunk, and there's going to be some drama, and she knows that.
That's over halfway through the movie.
It isn't. It's about 37 minutes in fact.
The party's at the hour mark of the movie.
It isn't at the hour mark, and even if it is, I don't care. Like, let's assume you're right. We're quibbling over 23 goddamn minutes. I don't care. At that point on, and I wasn't bored out of my mind earlier than that. I just wasn't super into it. At that point on, I'm just locked in, because it was just, from that point on, sparks were flying, the characters are interesting, and the dialogue's phenomenal. I mean, it's really smart, clever, interesting dialogue, and let's be clear here, in the wake of Harvey Weinstein being a raging piece of shit, here's a movie from 1950 that is super critical of the way Hollywood treats women. I mean, it's a sharp critique of the way Hollywood chews women up, spits them out, and the awful things women have to do to get ahead in Hollywood or get any success at all in a industry run by men. And we see these strong female characters doing very interesting things.
I think there's some good things in this movie about, I think it's progressive for women, but I don't know where you get this sort of pseudo-sexual women have to whore themselves out to become famous. I don't know where you got that from this movie. I really don't. I mean, I think it's a progressive movie. It's crazy that it's from the 50s, and it shows a lot. It's female characters. It's all about women's lives in the theater world.
So you don't think Eve Harrington was sleeping with any of these dudes?
Well, she was using her body. She would have done anything to become famous, but nobody was making her do that.
Okay. It was clear to her to get ahead, she was going to have to attach herself to some man.
All of her tools to become famous.
Okay, including her sexuality, right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
But she was the villain of this movie. Like, she just did not care. It was pure anarchy for her. She just wanted to be famous, and she was going to do whatever she could to get famous. So I guess maybe you had that opinion about it. I don't know where you get in there. This was like a indictment to the relationship between men and women in Hollywood or in theater.
So Margot Channing is in a play called Aged in Wood. That's the name of the play that she's starring in the course of the film. It seems like a not-so-subtle nod to Hollywood, and she's really anxious about how old she is, right? That she's getting too old to play young parts, and those are the parts for women, is for young-looking women, for women who appear young. There aren't really as many great parts for women in their middle age and older. So she's really anxious about being replaced. This is one of the central anxieties that Margot has throughout the whole film. It manifests itself both with her relationship with her, by the end of the film, husband Bill, and with her relationship with the writer, who's frustrated that she's still trying to play someone in her early 20s when she's in her 40s. And it's becoming more and more difficult for her to play those kind of roles, and she's going to get boxed out. And there's a up-and-coming person who clearly has no problem pretending to like men in order to get ahead. And I view her not as just some one-off psychopath, but as the mentality of lots of young women who want to get ahead and have to do that kind of stuff to get access to the kind of parts that will let them exercise their talents. Like, I view her as symbolic, not just as a one-off. I view her as a metaphor. The whole thing is about gender relationships. There's multiple characters who say, so Betty Davis's character, Margot Channing, and she's friends with this woman named Kate, and I apologize, I don't know the actress's name. Both say to male characters, you're a man, you don't understand, and it's clear they don't. She has another great line where she says, okay, he's 32, he looks 32, he'll look 32, he looked 32 10 years ago, he'll look 32 in 20 years. And Margot knows that she won't look that way. She will look much older, and that will be far harsher for her than her male counterparts, right?
What we're talking about in the last 6 minutes here is the best part of this movie. And the part I liked about the movie, and I think it's more about sexism than sort of male-female, sexual. It was just more about this
it is
sexism
sexist
in the industry, but not about sexual abuse or sexual assault. I guess I don't know where you're making those connections. But
because the men hold all the power and women have very little tools other than their sexuality. You said that she used all of her tools. She lies and she's duplicitous and she exploits her relationships with women. But the women aren't the gatekeepers. The men are. And she really has no other
none
tools.
of the men you see in this movie are. I mean,
yeah, they are. The writer is a gatekeeper.
None of them are sexist, and they don't treat the women poorly. I mean,
So in the when you're looking at the party scene with Marilyn Monroe, the critic Addison Witt trots her out and parades her around and tries to get her to get the attention and affections of certain men in the room.
And she's appealing to their egos to get parts.
Yeah, certainly there was a bit of that.
And that's an irony, because Marilyn Monroe had a notoriously awful time with men exploiting her and treating her like shit. So there's this wonderful layer of irony, which is sad, but here you have Marilyn Monroe, who hadn't yet become a star, portraying a woman who is using her sexuality to try to get auditions, and she succeeds in getting an audition. And we have this woman who's going to, Norma Jean from the Elton John song, is going to be totally exploited by men in the industry and used and abused for their own financial gain, for their ow whims. And I think
can we hear a little candle in the wind?
No, not right now. Maybe later. If no, not right now. I have a beautiful, gorgeous singing voice, but you'll have to someday down the road have to keep listening to the podcast to hear it. I think that's clearly a current in the film. I think it's inescapable, and it's one of the only things I could think about. Seeing this film and seeing these women go through all this stuff in the wake of Harvey Weinstein being a gas bag, here's a film which criticizes Hollywood for, I think, many of the same things in 1950. It's clearly
57 years ago.
Right. That's why I think it's great and it's interesting. And there's a conversation in the middle of the movie when they're at that party. These men are talking about, and there are women around too, talking about what it means to be an actor and why they're extolled so much in society, why they're so valued, and what it takes to be an actor. And Bill, I believe, is the one that says, it's not like their skill set is so rarefied and awesome that that's why we exalt them. It's that you have to go through such crap to become an actress. You have to want it so bad that you have to put up with such bullshit to be it. And that's why we extol. It's deliberately very hard and awful and unpleasant to be it. And we don't see too many. I mean, Lloyd is an idiot. He's the writer who Eve seduces and plays upon his, notions of being a father and, being a protector to her when she acts innocent and soft and weak. And
Lloyd and Eve ever have a relationship?
They were going to get married until...
Well, was that all bullshit, though?
No, it wasn't bullshit. She had him wrapped around her finger, right? And it was a great scene. So Eve tells her, and I think Kevin pointed out lesbian lover, I think that's probably true, calls and says...
In the bathroom? Lesbian lover. Where did you get that from?
We can get into homosexuality in this movie.
Fantasizing or what?
No, I think he's got a good point, and Kevin's not the only one. I missed it too because I was thinking about all of the straight gender politics, but I think it's pretty hard to escape that Eve is probably a lesbian.
Wait, what? Where are you fucking getting this? Did we watch the same movie? Are you kidding? You're joking, right?
No.
This is so fucking... You guys are fucking with me.
No, and in fact, she's not the only gay character in the film. Addison is a gay man too, at least according to some readings of the film. Yes, we don't know that definitively.
Sure, he never makes an advance on a woman in the movie, I guess, so you wouldn't assume...
Do we think Eve makes a credible advance on a man where she's not trying to get something out of him? I don't think she's attracted to a single man in the movie. She throws herself at Bill, who sees right through her bullshit, and he's like, just chalk it up to a, incomplete forward pass, baby. And
it's a great line.
It is a great line. There's lots of great lines in this movie. It's really smartly written. It's great. And then she successfully seduces Lloyd.
See, but that's an example of how this movie isn't criticizing the sexual dynamic between a man and a woman in theater, because she actually throws herself at this guy, and he's like, hold on.
He sees through her bullshit.
Happening.
And she thinks she's got Addison. She thinks
if this movie was an indictment on that relationship, you wouldn't throw in the guy's like, hold on, back up a second. That's not Harvey Weinstein, right? Harvey Weinstein is the opposite of that. He's forcing these women into sexual...
Well, okay, let me give it some caveats here. It's 1950 and there's the Hays Code, so it's not like they could just do whatever the fuck they wanted and they could have shown explicit sexual abuse. It would not have been able to happen. So I'm giving it that caveat and leeway because they couldn't have shown that stuff directly. It just was not possible. You can see Lloyd and his wife in the same bed. I mean, he gets a call, and they're in opposite ends of the fucking room. So the idea that he could be able to whip his dick out is nonsense. He couldn't do anything overt. And the film is very conscious.
Leaves, though. I suppose maybe that you're supposed to assume that he went to Eve. And
I see Addison jump in there, and, well, I've now become convinced that Addison is gay. My initial thought was that Addison was saying, come with me, sleep with me, I'll write you a great review. That's the trade-off we'll make, because I can turn this one-off performance and can really levy it into other roles. That was, I thought, the dynamic initially. Plays out a little, not quite that way, I don't think.
But she played him. She
thought she played him. She didn't play Addison. Addison saw right through her.
Well, Addison, yeah.
Yeah, correct.
She was the only one that uncovered her scheme.
And people realized too late that she was, a snake in the grass, as one metaphor you might want to use with regard to Eve Harrington. So we're kind of jumping all over the place. To give some context to the discussion, the film starts off, we see what is the equivalent of the Academy Awards, but for stage acting. And we see this woman named Eve winning the award. And I love that as a framing device. We see something we've seen in a variety of contexts, and we trace our steps back to see how we got to that point and break it down.
You're skipping what you just covered, like 20 minutes of the movie. It is a 20-minute scene of the Addison guy, and it's also voiceover, so it's just people talking.
It's from their perspective, Addison's perspective, and Karen's.
Of just words. They're throwing words like crazy at you.
Yes, there are words in this movie.
People are flying dialogue, and it's a boring scene with people sitting in a room. It was so hard to watch.
I think you should be more curious, though. The people that were talking were not exactly happy. There was a huge gushing monologue about Eve, and then everyone's clapping and happy, but then they panned across the audience, and the major players were all unhappy about Eve. And then
none of them were smiling.
You learn why. The movie is you learn why they're happy about
it.
Right, it breaks it down. And that's a really good framing device. I like it. But anyway, it cuts to the past, and we see Eve as this doting fan of Margot Channing.
Well, it bookends the movie, though, that award show.
Yeah, it's I think a really interesting way to structure the story. But we have Eve waiting outside for several weeks of a Margot Channing. So Margot Channing's Bette Davis' character. She's playing. She's a well-regarded, one of the 5 best stage actresses currently working at the time. And Eve is just this doting fan who waits. And eventually, Eve's friend, a woman named Karen, sees this woman, Eve, and says, hey, why do I always see you? They talk. And she's a doting fan, and she brings her in to meet Margot. And she has this really sob story about her husband dying, and then seeing Margot in the play gave her hope for the future. And then she becomes Margot's personal assistant. But slowly, other opportunities arise. She's able to become Margot's understudy, and then gets a chance to perform when Margot can't make a performance, and is using her abilities to rise in the ranks quite quickly as an actress. And so we see that happen. That kind of is
and the twist in the movie is that Eve was actually planning a lot of this and is pure evil.
Yeah, she's just amoral and is just a selfish person wanting to rise in the ranks of Hollywood. And I think there's an undercurrent that this is kind of what it takes to do it, by the way, that this is how one can get ahead in Hollywood. I think that's part of the indictment, is what she's doing is a rational way to go about doing it, because being nice and waiting your turn and acting in smaller plays isn't likely to yield the same results.
See, I disagree. I really think this movie is just about an example of somebody that would go to an extreme. Like, I think it's not an indictment on the industry. It's not a criticism of fame or anything like that. It's just a story about somebody that would do anything to be famous. And you're watching her just befriend this group of people and then stab them all in the back.
I think the film makes
whatever
it
she can
pretty clear it's a cycle.
Famous.
Right, but then you have a woman coming in. So Eve achieves her success, although with great cost to herself, and in a way that's not wholly satisfactory. She wins the award. She has less agency than she probably would like and had hoped for.
She's a sociopath.
But then, sure enough, a young woman, teenager, I guess, comes into her hotel room, who idolizes her in the same way that she idolized Margot.
Is she a lesbian
and the
too?
the cycle continues. Right, this is an ambitious young girl who we meet at the end of the film who has the same ambitions as Eve. It's clearly not just a one-off. This is just one crazy person. We're seeing one crazy person's rise to power. We're seeing the dynamics and the machinations.
Betty Davis did do that.
We don't really know what she did to rise to fame.
She happens to be dating the director, though.
Well, that's true. She is dating the director and has best friends.
Younger than her.
Yep, by 8 years. And those 8 years are going to stretch more and more as time goes on, as she says in the film. And she's also really good friends with the writer, so she's established good relationships that enable her to be successful. I mean,
her writing plays specifically for her.
Right, and this guy's the most commercially successful stage writer at the time. Right, she's going with the guy that's going to make her the most money, and they work together to be commercially successful.
My frustration about this, everything you're saying I like. All of the themes and the context and the story, I think they're important. It's good. It's interesting. It's just the presentation. It's like if you ate a great meal and it's really cooked well and it's wonderful, but it looked like shit. That's the way I feel about this movie.
I think the movie looked like shit.
No,
I mean, it's not well shot. I'm not praising it. I'm not praising its cinematography, but I don't care.
You talk about the scene where they're walking in Connecticut. That's one of the worst.
Oh, the rear projection. That was an awful sequence where they didn't. I guess they couldn't even shoot it in Hollywood. I don't know.
They couldn't even go across the street and shoot it.
Yeah, I can't explain that. I can't explain that. That was awful. That's unrepentingly awful.
One of the worst things I've seen in a movie.
And there was one scene where the camera shook like somebody tripped or whatever. I saw it shake at one point. There was one moment that happened. I don't care. I'm not praising this movie for cinematography.
And I'm not talking specifically cinematography.
Like a reverse Birdman. If Birdman was poorly shot but smartly written, that's what this movie is.
So you mentioned Birdman, right? So and I was not lost on me when I was watching this movie. I thought Birdman is one of my favorite movies to come out in the last 10 years. I absolutely love that movie. There's a lot to compare this to Birdman to. I agree. But exactly, Birdman is fun to watch.
And then I have to hear people talk, and I want them to shut up. And I think, my God, why do I have to hear this obnoxious?
2 hours and 18
the
minutes
relationship,
of people talking. Betty Davis is just blabbing.
Yeah, because Birdman isn't just people talking. That's literally what the movie is them talking, and then Michael Keaton.
The other movie I thought of was Black Swan. I think this is very similar to Black Swan in the idea that this female would do anything she can to achieve the dream that she wants. And sort of the obsession with that, although you don't really see that side of it. But it's a very similar story, and like Fatal Attraction. Like, this story has been remade hundreds.
Sure, there are elements of lots of future movies. There's elements of single white female there, too.
This is not, it's just not entertaining to watch.
I was entertained.
Rich white people blab at each other for 2 hours and 18 minutes. It felt like a 10-hour movie. It really did. I
suppose the rich white people in Birdman, I found them insufferable because they didn't say anything that was interesting. So that's maybe where you and I disagree. I loved the dialogue in this movie. I loved listening to it. I loved the rapport they had. It just had this nice mix of venom and wit. I was really on board. I was compelled, and I think there's so much.
It might as well be like a radio broadcast. You get the same out of it as you would.
I disagree. There's some great moments in there acting-wise. So before we got sidetracked, because you're incredulous that somebody might perceive characters to be gay, even though they couldn't overtly be gay because of the production code, so you have to look into these kind of subtle wrinkles. Gay or not, Eve has a woman call Lloyd the writer's house, right?
You're jumping way ahead.
Well, I'm not trying to go in order. I'm just trying to come up with a scene here that I think is well acted, and the face work of the actress that plays Karen is phenomenal. Lloyd gets the call, and he says he'll be right over, and he looks at his wife, and she just becomes pale white. She knows the implication, and he knows it. They never say anything. He doesn't say, "I'm leaving you," but it's there. He's leaving in the middle of the house in the middle of the night to go be with this actress that he has a thing for. And the implication is clear there without shitty dialogue. It's super well acted. And when the weight of that moment really resonated with me. Like, that's a great moment that you wouldn't have got from the stage performance. And Betty Davis's facial expressions were really good. She's a great...
How does it make someone a lesbian? I'm guessing...
So should we dive into the homosexuality?
Again,
Well, I was trying to table that some more just to mention a great scene. But, okay. So let's accept that homosexuality could not be overtly shown on screen. We accept that premise?
Sure.
Because they couldn't. So they can't go out and say, I'm attracted to women, I'm attracted to men. That wasn't an option. That film would have been cut, and that would have never been allowed to be shown in the theater. So, okay. There's that scene where that woman, Eve puts her arm around that woman, or that woman puts her arm around Eve, Kevin?
They both put their arms around each other.
So they walk up the steps. Yep, is an embrace. Earlier scene at the party, everybody keeps telling Margot Channing, Betty Davis' character, to go up because she's kind of drunk and being nasty and pissing everybody off. So everybody tells her she should sleep. And she has this big long thing about taking her clothes off and getting put to bed and being tucked in. And she asks Eve if she wants to do it. And Eve says, if you'd like it. And she says, I wouldn't.
You're reading into what she says to her boyfriend. They weren't married, right?
Yeah.
She says to her boyfriend, you'd come tuck me in, and then you'd sneak out after I was asleep. Just basically saying, like, you go have more fun, put me to bed, and whatever. It was more like a child thing, like I'm your child, you'll tuck me in and then go have fun. And she offers to Eve to do the same thing because it's, again, like, bullshit. You do that too, wouldn't you, Eve? And she's like, yes, I would. I would help. I would put you to bed and tuck you in like I'm your mom.
But it was, I think, a pretty clear link between her husband having a sexual link and then Eve doing it. And there's lots of other people who have asserted this. This is not just Kevin and I's nonsense. How would you make lesbianism more overt? How would you do it? How if you couldn't say I'm a lesbian?
And you couldn't even say, because they weren't married, so they couldn't say that, you want to come back and have some sex and then go back to your
Right, she
party.
couldn't even say that, like, because that was also kind of the implication, like, you want to come have a little dally with me and then come back to the party after I'm passed out.
You're telling me if she made a joke, a more overt joke about Eve coming in and let's go to bed together, they wouldn't have.
Absolutely, we couldn't even see a married man and woman be in the same bed. You could not. Yes, they could not make a joke about them having sex. Like, straight people couldn't make a joke about having sex.
You're saying they did. They just didn't say it overtly. I don't know.
My point is they had to hint. No, there's a movie called The Celluloid Closet, which covers this movie as a praising the heterosexual life. It's a documentary about homosexuality in film in the Hays Code era, where gay people were not allowed to be even characters in movies because it was considered so morally abhorrent.
I could hear that.
And they viewed this.
Addison was gay.
I can talk to you about people that I'm looking right here on Google, people that have made arguments.
It's on the internet.
Yeah, these are professors and film critics, but yeah, fuck, their opinions can't be right. It's just yours. That view this as a endorsement of the heterosexual lifestyle at the expense, because the two gay characters end up together and they're amoral, awful people in the context of this film.
Okay.
So
whatever. Okay.
But anyway,
interesting opinion, I guess. I don't know.
I mean,
you're reading into it.
Why do you think those Eve and her partner embraced after
It was just like a, hey, thanks for helping me out. Let's go upstairs. I don't. It's just they hugged each other.
Why would they have that? Why would they have that affectation of, oh yeah, let's walk up these stairs together like we're lovers?
They even describe Margot and Eve's initial, when Eve is just Margot's assistant, as a honeymoon, and she gets dotted over. I don't think it's too much of a stretch. I mean,
okay.
Eve was definitely in love with Margot, like a Mr. Burns type character in the beginning.
She was obsessed with her.
Sam Staggs wrote a book called All About Eve, all about Eve, and about the film's homosexual elements. Eve's lesbian seemed apparent specifically.
Yeah, I'll hear your argument that her relationship with Margot was more tantamount to she was in love with her.
Yeah,
obsessed with her, rather than this hug from this lady she asked her to call. I mean, that's crazy.
Well, I think you look at the whole body of evidence.
The relationship between her and Margot, I think you could actually make an argument that they were in love.
Because I'm convinced she was in love with Margot. Margot didn't reciprocate.
Right, she was in love with Margot. She wanted to be Margot. She was obsessed with her. Again, like similar.
That's why that speech by Margot at the party when she was going to bed is so powerful and so hints so strongly at that, because you see her reaction. She's like, "Yeah, I want to do that," and then I would not like that, and then she's like crushed from that. Why would she be crushed if it was like, oh, just tuck her in?
No, that was more. I would literally do anything to make you happy. It was what I read from that. Like literally,
feels like a sexual
if you
thing
told me to
anyway.
kill somebody, I'll do it. Like she was down to do whatever.
If somebody said they would do
She
anything
was BTS. Let me tell you.
Well, if somebody said they would do anything to make you happy, wouldn't that include having sex with you?
I think that was more in line with her desire to become famous. It's like I would literally kill somebody. I would sleep with you. I would do anything. I'd eat shit if I needed to become famous. Like that was literally what this lady would have done. Like
sure,
she was so.
But those things aren't mutually
famous.
exclusive, by the way. She could love Eve and also be willing to do just about anything to be famous.
Maybe her sexuality was whatever it requires me to become famous. But beyond that, I think you're reading too much into it.
I think this film invites all sorts of interesting thoughts. And I saw it last night, and I went to bed just mind racing about this movie. And I've been thinking about it all day, and I've been excited to talk about it because I'm still trying to parse my thoughts. But I think there's so much about women and Hollywood and the relationship of women and men and the double standard for men and women in Hollywood and the way women are treated and women's agency, right? I mean, if this is the late 40s and you're a teenager, a teenage woman, young girl, whatever it was, young woman, however you want to phrase it, where do you see women empowered in life? Where do you see that happen?
Today. I mean, forget
Fair enough.
50s.
Fair enough. It's a problem today. I agree wholeheartedly. But let's limit it to the 1940s. Where do you see women that are empowered, that are in control, that seem to be in charge of their reality? Well, film and stage acting are about the two biggest examples that I can think of, where women seem powerful and have agency.
The thought that this character, Margot, was unmarried, had no kids, was rich. I mean, she had like a multi-story apartment in New York somewhere.
Yeah, she's well off.
Yeah, she's the lead actress.
In the 50s or 40s when this was made, is like unheard of. Now we're watching a movie of that about her in her life. Like, there's probably very few examples of women living that kind of life.
Sure.
Right, so I think it'd be very easy to be somebody like Eve and see a empowered woman who's able to do what she wants, and whether she's a lesbian or no, would say, that's what I want to do. I want to be empowered, and that's my path to get there. And that itself is an indictment to women's options and the way they were treated and viewed by society.
Do you think Black Swan is an indictment to women's place in America?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, is it the central theme? I don't know, but it's a part of it, right?
In the same way
the director is a creep, and he has a relationship with Winona Ryder, and she gets too old, and then he starts setting his sights on Natalie Portman's character, right?
Very similar to this movie.
And he tells her to live a little and have sex, and then he's like trying to get with her. And he uses his position of power to kind of coerce in subtle, insidious ways a sexual relationship with a woman who wants to be a ballet actress, like she wants to be a star of ballet. And this is the guy that gets to make those decisions. So,
but the difference is, in this movie, Eve is a sociopath and doesn't have any feeling.
Well, is Natalie Portman's character a sociopath?
She's crazy.
She's schizophrenic,
she's losing
basically.
her mind, but she has remorse and she has fears and feelings that Eve doesn't in this movie. Eve is a serial killer in this movie.
Well, yeah, they mentioned she's a killer.
Where they describe her as a killer.
Because
she is, though.
Unconscious.
And then he's like, sorry, used the wrong term or whatever. Right?
Champ.
I got my boxing terms wrong, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that's a clever line. That was a great line of dialogue.
But I think it's more... The Margot is the character that presents a better picture and a more powerful picture for women in this movie, not Eve. Eve is
right, but I view Eve's position as an indictment. But that's part of the problem, is she has to do this stuff to excel. And by all accounts, she's a great actress, so it's not a question of her having skill. I think the film just says that she's a great actress, and I accept it. But despite
she lives that too. She pretends
acts
all
every
sorts
moment of
things.
her life,
Yeah.
and she's a sociopath, so that makes her a really good liar, and that's what a great actor is in a great many ways.
And Addison mentions that this dissociative mind personality.
And this is the person we praise, right? We praise actors and artists and all the time for having these skill sets. And it makes me think of every time I've seen an Academy Award winner for Best Actress, what has that woman done to get there? What has she had to do to be in a position to star in this movie, to get that role, to achieve this moment in life? Going through all the shit in Hollywood. I thought about that constantly, right? It begs that question. We see
like
a very
casting
mundane
couch, you're saying, and stuff like that?
Maybe. Whatever else you had to do. You're fighting for people. You have other people who want your role. You have younger people who are going to come and try to displace you. And Hollywood sets an expiration date on you, basically.
Yeah, but I still go back. Eve would be an exception to that. Because she's so crazy, and this movie paints her as that
How many
character.
actresses do you think are crazy like that way, the divas? Do you think none? Do you think there are none that are so passionate about the
I think Harvey
dream?
Weinstein is crazy in that way.
He's a psychopath asshole.
Right, and so is she in this movie. She's not a victim.
But you don't think there are any?
To paint
You don't
her
think
as a
there are
victim?
any?
I think that's sexist to paint Eve as the victim in this movie. She's not a victim at all. She is the villain of this movie. She would do anything. None of it mattered to her. She didn't have any remorse or any feelings towards what she did. She would literally slit someone's throat and feel nothing from it.
So what would have been a better approach if she wants to be, an actress, whatever? What would have been
Eve?
Eve? Yeah. What would have been a better approach for her?
I don't know. I can't say. I guess I have no idea.
It's not an indictment that her tactics were rewarded. You don't see the fact that she's ultimately successful as an indictment. That it's not like she's punished morally. People are happy to see. Like Addison knows that she's deceitful. Bill figures it out eventually. So does Margot. So does Karen. But it doesn't matter. She becomes famous. And they all have to show up at her award ceremony and begrudgingly pretend to care. Badly, I suppose. But they have to show up and be there as she's getting applause. It works. That's the problem.
I saw it as if the movie was 10 minutes longer, you would see Eve slide down and slit that girl's throat.
I disagree. I think you're going to see her eventually become the same position that Margot's in. She's going to get old, and some younger woman is going to come in and try to displace her.
Killing people. This is American Psycho with Eve as the star. That's what this movie is.
I don't want to dive into what American Psycho is. That is a whole other can of worms.
So I had a question. So the party scene, right? What are we trying to learn from that scene? It's just we're seeing Margot lose it. Is that basically her, like, she's just losing control of herself?
Well, you think
it was
she seems like she's becoming paranoid unreasonably because of this nice little girl Eve from Wisconsin coming in, and it's not relatable, her actions. In fact, she's alienating everyone around her because of how she is. But the undercurrent is that Eve really was plotting and using her guile to try to get somewhere.
Yeah, it's a manifestation of a couple of things. So Margot's legitimately concerned about her aging and how it's going to impact her acting career. Because she has to face the fact that she's not going to be permitted to act
24 or whatever the new role is
for the rest of her life.
Cora.
Her days of being able to pass as a mid-20s actor, mid-20s female woman is not going to happen. So she's got to figure out, does she fight it and rail against it? Does she retire? Does she switch to different kind of roles, which probably aren't going to be starring roles?
Yeah, that's a good point, because she hadn't admitted to herself that she was 40 yet, and she didn't want to even tell anybody and talk about it. So that was kind of a turning point.
So Eve is a representation, not just somebody who's literally trying to supplant her, right? Somebody who's trying to replace her, somebody who's younger and can look the part that she's trying to play. And she's got insecurity about her relationship with Bill, who might want to leave her. She doesn't know, and she doesn't think it's going to last with him because he's going to have younger women who are going to be happy to throw themselves at him in order to get the parts, in order to work with him and get to act. She understands. I think she can relate perfectly to what Eve's going through, because I think she did go through something similar. Maybe she's not the sociopath that Eve was, but she understands having a desire to succeed as an actor and being willing to do some unpleasant things to make that dream come true. I think that's part of her anxiety too, is that it's not that Eve is acting completely irrationally. She understands where Eve's coming from ultimately, I think. She's not like, why would she want to be an actor? This is what I wanted to do. This is what my dream has been, and I've gotten to live it out. And she's territorial about it and dealing with her agent, because she can't keep doing it because it's not fair, and Hollywood's not fair, and stage acting isn't fair. It treats women shittily.
So I had another question too, and I sent this to you guys texted. Was this movie aware of itself? I mean, the opening dialogue seems more like Deadpool, where it's like totally commenting on what it is. You know what I mean? It's self-aware of what the movie is, what it's about, and the world that it's in. Is that what this movie was? I just had a hard time.
Yeah, I 100% think so, because the director was also the writer, and there were a lot of in-jokes about directing and writers and how they interact, and where their lot is in the acting world. So yeah, go ahead, Ben.
No, I agree. I think it's very clearly inviting. So it's stage actors in this film, but it's very clearly inviting comparison to Hollywood. It wants that.
Rare in movies at this time?
Probably less rare than you think. There's another movie that came out the same year.
No, that's rare. I mean, that's like I mentioned Deadpool. There are not a lot of movies that are aware of it being a movie. Even like the comical action movies that come out, they take themselves serious, and they're very,
That's why they're dumb.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I'm not.
That's part of why I think this movie is so smart. Is it's aware of what's going on, and it's aware of the hypocrisies of Hollywood, and it's commenting and inviting those in satirical. I think it's an extremely satirical look at Hollywood.
There was a part of the movie where he's going to go make movies. And was that making fun of making movies, even though we're watching a movie? You know what I mean? It
was the opposite. It was, I think, so Eve makes some sort of reference about how great stage acting is and how it's so highbrow. And he's like, well, movies are highbrow for some people. Like, this is what some people's art is. So let's not be quick to judge.
More of an indictment to theater than, because it pokes fun at theater a lot in the movie, and then it talks about how self-important theater is. But we're watching a movie. We're not watching a play about it.
Right. Sure. And there's an interesting scene where they're comparing furs. It was interesting to me anyway. You probably thought it was dumb to talk about fur coats. But one had a sable, and the other was a mink. You remember that?
I remember it,
okay.
And the sable, I don't know anything about coats, but I gathered that the sable was the super nice one. I was able to get that from the context.
Why do I give a shit about their fur coats? Sorry.
Oh, because one was from a movie star, and they were just talking about how movie stars act and their self-importance.
Yeah, because you never saw the movie star, too, right?
No, you just saw her coat.
She came to the party
for about 5 minutes.
Coat, and everybody was losing their shit.
Yeah.
Movie star.
And they were like, and she left with half the men.
And they made a comment that, she got half the men in a tizzy, or there was some comment about how she got the men riled up, that showed up and greased the wheels with all the men who have positions of power, is my take on that, and then left.
With the men.
Yeah, that she was using, again, her sexuality to...
I think I liked this movie more than I thought I did.
Isn't it great that we can have this discussion? Doesn't this mean it's a great movie?
No. I still will stand by the fact it's frustrating to me that this movie is so boring. It really, it's 2 hours and 18 minutes, and seriously, I paused it at one point. It was an hour in, and I was shocked.
So what were the people in 1950 thinking then? This was the second highest grossing movie. It won 6 Academy Awards, nominated for 14. What were people thinking back then?
The same thing we'll say 50 years from now about Avatar. What were people thinking?
Avatar...
Did that win Best Movie?
Sucked. Titanic. What the hell were people thinking about Titanic? That's boring. It's a boring movie.
It wasn't boring to most people. It didn't make a shitload of money because it was boring. A lot of people saw it several times, and I'm going to go ahead and say it. A lot of them were women, so I get that it appealed to things that don't appeal to you, but people saw it several times. My sister saw it several times. They loved it. It made them happy.
Your sister was alive in the 1950s?
We're talking about Titanic right now.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yes, my sister was alive in the 1950s. Yes, correct. And she got married and didn't sleep in the same bed as her husband. Also. She just thought it was gross and didn't want to be around him. And I thought, why are you married? And they said, They shrugged, and that was it. Only explanation I got. I don't know what to say about the boredom thing. This is a better, smarter, more interesting movie than Avatar. It's not even close. Avatar's a horribly written, but kind of fun, passable schlock.
You mentioned other movies, so like Mulholland Drive, which Kevin, I know, is one of your all-time favorite movies.
That's
Maybe your all-time favorite movie? I don't know.
That's up there. Yeah.
Right? That is a better version of this movie. It's interesting. It's artistic. It's thought-provoking.
What is Mulholland Drive saying about women in Hollywood?
It's saying almost the same thing. I mean,
they were lesbians.
It was overt, yes, absolutely. She was in love with her. But it was filmed in a great way. David Lynch was brilliant in the presentation of the story. It was ambiguous. It was scary. I mean, some people think it's a horror movie.
It is.
But that is...
And Billy Ray Cyrus was in it.
Billy Ray Cyrus. Shout out to Billy Ray. That's the difference between this movie, All About Eve, which is same themes, very same... And like I said, very important stuff. The story, the meaning... the stuff about Margot and her life and women at the time, super important.
Stuff that's still applicable, I think, into 2017.
More today. This movie, if it came out today, would be shocking, which is crazy to think.
Yeah, 67 years later.
It would be a fucking shocking movie. People would be losing their minds about like how important this movie is. But yes, but my point is, it's wrapped in this just boring, hard to watch presentation. If this movie comes on TNT, you're not going to sit and watch 10 minutes of it. You're going to turn it off.
Why am I watching TNT in 2017? Why am I turning TNT on? I mean, if I'm watching TNT, just come with a shovel, hit me in the head, and just throw me in the backyard and light a fire.
If this movie comes on, it's halfway through, you're not going to sit down and watch 20 minutes?
I don't do that with any movie. I'm not just like going to watch half. I mean, this is 2017. I can just go pick and watch a movie. Like, it's wonderful. I don't have to scan through the channels hoping for something to pass the time. I can make a deliberate, conscious choice to watch a film that's engaging and smart, like All About Eve, which is ridiculous. Yeah, it's not light entertainment. It requires more engagement than most movies. You have to pay attention to the dialogue. It goes whip fast, and there's a lot of subtext buried in, and it's tied together. But I think it's so smartly written. It's so thought-provoking and engaging.
I have another question. If you look at the script of this movie, right, it's got all dialogue for each character. If you look at a script of a movie that comes out today, what do you think the amount of dialogue, like the difference between the amount of dialogue in this movie versus, you know, a great movie that came out now?
I mean, first of all, most scripts are just writing.
There Will Be Blood. There's a half an hour of that movie where nobody speaks.
But a script is almost all dialogue, and that's it. There's not really like blocking or stage directions unless the director wrote the screenplay. It's literally just
for example,
words.
The script in All About Eve is 1,000 pages. The script in There Will Be Blood is 20 pages.
Who cares? The different kinds of movies doing different things. Doesn't make All About Eve.
Visually,
you were bored by All About Eve, and that's cool. You're allowed to be bored by a movie, but I think it was incredibly smart and engaging.
But it's not just All About Eve. It's old movies. This is the whole point of this.
I don't have the problem with On the Waterfront was pretty boring. I wasn't really into On the Waterfront. It wasn't engaging psychologically in a really fun way. I wasn't captivated by the characters. This is different. The characters were almost all interesting. I didn't have that same experience that you had. I was interested in seeing these characters collide and interact and seeing how it played all and tying it into what I think is a really smart critique of Hollywood that is salient today in 2017 and is better than most movies that come out today. Legitimately, not just me being asinine. This is such a smart movie. I was not bored by it. I mean, it took a little while to get going. There was not enough drama early on, not enough conflict, and once that happened, and I was on board. Yeah, seeing Eve dote over Margot wasn't riveting stuff, sure, but that was set up for the compelling second and third acts. Just phenomenal, I thought.
Yeah, and I liked how early on they laid a lot of foreshadowing. Like when Eve first tells her poor sob story, the character Birdie sees right through it, and she's like, "Oh, add some hounds to the end of it." And so her story isn't convincing all the way, and it brings in some seeds of doubt that I thought were interesting to follow. And it is kind of a shocking reveal, I thought, when you saw just where she was going and what she was trying to do.
The bathroom scene, right? That's the first time you find out what he really
right. Because even at first she was soft and apologetic about everything and was trying to give excuses for why it happened. She says she goes to the dentist sometimes and doesn't act herself when she's gassed up, and that's what Addison DeWitt had to cast a spell on her. But then it turns out pretty quickly that it was all in her mind, run by her, and she had some bad intentions.
Yeah, so she initially just starts off with that sob story, which is a lie. She
secretary at a brewery.
That part was true.
I had a question though. What brewery do you think?
She lived in.
It had to be Miller, Milwaukee, right? So she had a.
She lived in Wisconsin. Did they say where in Wisconsin?
I don't know if they said Milwaukee.
Milwaukee for a bit. She referenced.
Oh, okay.
Her dad went to war.
So it's Miller.
It had to be Miller, right?
Could be.
Sure. Maybe they just didn't want to pay.
Bush.
Maybe they didn't want to pay for the rights to use the name. But yeah, she has a sob story about her husband being killed in World War II. It's complete fabrication. She has that to ingratiate herself with Eve.
I thought it was her dad.
No. Are you serious?
Talking about her dad.
No,
she's supposed to be like 16.
No, she is claims to be a secretary at a brewery, which turned out to be one of the true elements of her story. She claims she met this guy named Ed, no last name because it's a fictional Ed who doesn't exist, and said that he went off to fight in the war, and she was supposed to meet him in San Francisco, but he never showed up because he got killed in World War II. And then she went and saw Margot Channing play, and it was, life affirming and helped her realize life was worth living or whatever. And that was all a fabrication. And Addison DeWitt is this theater critic, who sees right through Eve and collects her lies and sees what she's doing and works with her, and Eve thinks she has the upper hand on him, but in the end it reveals that he has the upper hand on her. He knows all about her sordid past. I think he probably knows she's a lesbian too, so the film couldn't say that. And many believe he's gay. We don't see him with any women. We don't see him put the moves on Eve. Although I think you could have a reading where he makes Eve sleep with him too. I mean, you could read that into the film.
Because she wouldn't let him
but
leave.
But he basically says, I own you to her. She has her sights set on breaking up a marriage of this writer, this woman, so that she can have the best writer in America, or at least the most commercially successful.
Is Addison the one that brought Marilyn Monroe
to
the party?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And he was just like releasing her to the hounds.
Yeah, it wasn't more like, hey, this is my girl. It was more like, everybody, like, you're sort of like, go fight with the sharks, basically.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Go talk to those men over there, get them excited, and he makes jokes about how
he felt like he was a kingmaker. He with the stroke of a pen, he could build someone's career and end careers. So he really got off on that. That was what he enjoyed doing, and he was a dirty part of the process.
Was this like really early Marilyn Monroe?
Yes, this was her second ever on-screen performance. So it's a very small part.
Right, and that she's in this movie just adds a whole other level of irony.
Yeah.
Just exploited by a bunch of shitty men in Hollywood.
But she looked phenomenal. I mean, she stole the scene.
Insane. Like, when she walks on the screen, it's like, holy shit, you can't look away, honestly.
Oh, it's true.
So you weren't bored in that moment when Marilyn Monroe...
I mean, it's like a pig,
well, when she was on screen, you weren't bored.
No, I'm just saying, like, you know why she's an icon. I mean, people today still know about her beauty, you know what I mean? That's really all you know about her. I don't know anything else about Marilyn Monroe.
She's married to a lot of men, Joe DiMaggio.
I mean,
Arthur Miller, playwright, by the way, one of the preeminent playwrights in America.
You referenced Arthur Miller in the movie, too.
Yes, because he's one of the preeminent playwrights at the time. Yes. So all that stuff.
What I know from her is from Candle in the Wind, so if you want to sing I could...
Man, you really want to hear my sweet...
No, I'm just saying that's how I...
You want to hear me sing?
Story.
Goodbye, Norma Jean. Well, that's all I know.
Those are the only lyrics you know. Though I barely knew you at all.
Nude. I knew that. Right?
I never met you. Well, go ahead.
But I saw you at the mall. I don't know. I don't know what the actual lyrics are.
When you were,
and
then you saw my yearbook.
Jean, though I barely knew you at all. That's about all that I get.
Well, the chorus, you gotta know the chorus.
Why don't you sing it for us, Eric?
It seemed to me you lived your life
like a candle in the wind. Never knowing who to turn to when the rain set in.
Rain set in, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, tear to my eye.
But anyway, I think that's another just wonderful layer of irony in this just film rich with awesome stuff. I mean, depressing because I think all of the critiques are true and valid pretty much. I mean, let me talk about some stuff about the film that I didn't love, because I've been kind of effusive with my praise so far. I didn't like all the stuff with Betty Davis's character, Margot, feeling like she just needed a man in her life. Even though I think that was true to this character who sort of was seeing the writing on the wall, it still felt a little too much like, I need a man to be successful, or to be a woman. There was a line like that. I needed to be a woman. You have to be a man. You have to have a man or something.
Yeah, a man to come home to, or something like that.
It was like that line was gross, and I really did feel like it was a validation of the heterosexual lifestyle. I know you don't buy Eve's lesbianism or Addison's homosexuality. That's what it felt like. Like that's really what matters in life is getting married. You know, that's what's really great is finding somebody to love.
I mean, that
well, I thought there was
a 40-year-old woman who is unmarried and has no kids that doesn't have those feelings. It'd be crazy.
Okay. You know, okay. If there are any 40-year-old women who aren't married and don't have kids, you're allowed to, and if you don't feel lonely,
I'm not
fine,
saying you're not allowed to. I'm just saying you're going to have those feelings.
If you don't have those feelings, why don't you write us and tell us that you exist and that Eric is wrong.
ouroldmoviesgood@gmail.com.
Yeah, that's our website.
If you've
that's our
never felt those feelings, please do email me. I'll give you
and please put subject line, Eric is a dum-dum. Please.
He's worried about you being lonely.
But I like their relationship. I like Margot and Bill's relationship, by the way. I thought it was endearing, and it's rare for me to care about characters, but I wanted them to be together and be happy. I liked them together. They were equally witty.
So
and
many
smart.
old movies fail to touch on real themes. You mentioned the two beds thing, you know, like how unrealistic that is.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's annoying.
But the fact that a woman in her 40s feeling alone and wanting to get married is like a real thing, and it's.
So you like that aspect of the film?
I thought it was real. It's realism. It's putting a real.
So you related?
Yeah. Yes. I related to the realism
you were
of that.
in between the boredom. You had a moment of relating to a character.
I've told you right now. I said it before. I'll say it again. The best part of this movie is Margot and her struggles, and the obsession that Eve had. The rest of it could just be thrown in a river because the rest of it was so hard to watch and boring. But you take that theme, you take the story, and again, it's been remade in other movies and done so much better than this. And it's like you know, Bob Dylan songs. He wrote some great. I love Bob Dylan. He's one of my favorite songwriters. But some of his songs are not pleasant to hear in the same way, and you hear some other people redo his songs, and they're amazing. Along the Watchtowers, a perfect example. You can't listen to that song, the original Bob Dylan song, and say Jimi Hendrix just totally screwed that up. You're wrong. I think you're wrong if you think that. And very similar to this movie is you take the central idea and the characters and the story, and you throw out all of the boring shit, and you make a great movie. There's something great there.
I think the film was pretty well constructed, and I was not nearly as bored with it as I've already said. And I think most of the stuff that isn't super exciting is necessary as setup. Plot.
What we're saying is the movie's not boring. You are, Eric.
If you make this movie today, what does it look like?
I'd love to see Meryl Streep in the title role. We've done this several times, but I think Meryl Streep would destroy it.
Especially her right now.
As Eve. Or not Eve, excuse me, misspeak. Not Eve,
Margot.
She would just be wonderful.
Yeah, well, now they would ratchet up instead of being a 40, hitting 60 maybe, I guess?
Yeah, whatever it is. 50, 60.
Well, you could do, you know, like Angelina Jolie, somebody who's an old, you know, aging actress that no longer gets, you know, the parts that she used to. Whatever. I mean, but it would be so much better now, I think. It would still be important. Still be important.
I mean, this is the thing we didn't hit on. The casting is great. Like, Betty Davis was an actress facing that crossroads herself. You talked about the realism. She was getting older. Her status as a sex symbol was going to start to wane. And ironically, Marilyn Monroe was going to come in And people remember Marilyn Monroe. People don't remember Betty Davis as a sex symbol from the first half of the 20th century. But she was. But that started to wane. There was up-and-coming actresses coming up to displace her to get all those great roles she used to get.
Of that, what does it even matter? These are actors and actresses. Like, why is their beauty and sex appeal what we remember about it?
That is depressing, and that's exactly part of the indictment, I think, in the film. That's exactly my point. Right. Women are being valued for how they look.
Exactly what I think is great about this movie.
Well, then we agree.
Of it. But the presentation of it is hard. It's a hard pill to swallow, I think.
I did not need any. I did not need a spoonful of sugar for this medicine. The medicine tasted quite good to me. No sugar needed for me. I thought it was just, again, I wasn't bored. I mean, listening to.
Did you swallow?
I swallowed it all down.
Okay.
One shot. One quick gulp. Seeing smart characters read smart lines of dialogue and have, genuine emotions, really interesting to me. I mean, everything at the party was great. I mean, just every conversation they had. Betty Davis seeming to be crazy, but really being validated because of the dehumanizing process of Hollywood and aging was just great. I mean, it just worked. And Eve's ruthless ambition, I mean, I think Betty Davis has probably had to ward off younger actresses many times, and is something she could relate to.
Did she win any awards, Betty Davis?
She won 2 Oscars early on in her career.
But not for this.
Not for this, because Anne Baxter made the studio also put her in the Best Actress category.
As opposed to supporting.
Yeah.
So they ate each other.
Studio
votes away from each
so
other,
Eve and her were both nominated for Best Actress.
Yeah.
And Eve won.
Neither one. They
canceled each other's out.
Okay.
Anne Baxter, I think, deserved an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, or actress in this case, and obviously Betty Davis. Best
they were phenomenal, and I mean the male actors were good too. I thought they were all well cast. The guy that played Addison was venomous and witty and sharp,
and he won Best
disgusting.
Supporting Actor.
I think if you make this movie now, you have some scenes where Eve is alone in her apartment and fucking losing her mind, because I think that would make it so much more interesting. Like,
you and I are so
psychosis that this lady.
It's not the psychosis I like seeing. It's that she's in some ways being extremely rational. She sees the playing field better than anybody else does. She's seeing the moves and making them and rewarded for it because she's got it right. She sees what really matters,
Right. She's not crazy in that way. She's not having a breakdown. She's discovering herself.
She's ruthless and amoral, but I don't think she's psychotic, and that's the difference between this and Black Swan, for example. Like, she's not having a psychotic breakdown.
But that's not fun to watch. Just some total bland, I'm just taking over the world. I don't even really care. I'm just.
No, that wasn't it at all. She goes from idolatry and doting on Margot to chasing her dream of power.
And she tries to use the man to get it, and she goes unsuccessfully to Bill, has Addison, thinks she's got control of Addison. Then she tries to jump ship to Lloyd, but then Addison jumps in and says, "Yeah, that's not happening because I know all about your bullshit."
About her. I wish there was more about who she is and what she's doing.
You want All About Eve to be more about Eve.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we have plenty there, and I think it's pretty easy to relate to at least some of her impulses.
I mean, there's not her lack of dialogue. Let's give her a little bit more. Let's hear a little bit more about her.
How can you? But that's part of the problem. Nothing she says is sincere in the film. Everything is
here's some sincerity from her.
Who's she going to be sincere with?
I don't know. Her lesbian lover.
She couldn't even be sincere with Addison, who called her out on her bullshit and knew she was full of shit. She couldn't even be honest for a second with the guy who saw through her thoroughly. I think that's part of her character, and I think it's interesting to lots of different motives you can project onto her. But I think it's just weird. I was not. I was engaged. This is not a boring movie to me. It's pretty exciting.
Do you want to hit up the people with some one-star reviews?
Sure. So this movie has absolute, total, universal acclaim. 100% listing on Rotten Tomatoes. There were 622 Amazon reviews. Only one of them was negative. there were 8 total 1-star reviews, but those 7 of them all dealt with the DVD that didn't work. The 1-star review off of Amazon is written by Book Lover on July 24th, 2016, with the title, "Warning, this movie is not about Eve from the Bible. ... Reads, my Bible study group was most upset by this movie. We thought this was going to be about Eve from the Bible. It's not. We felt very cheated. This movie is an outrage to people of faith. Plus, it was black and white, but the DVD case is in color. False advertising all around. 1 star."
Do you think? How long do you think they got into the movie before they realized it wasn't about Eve from the Bible? Half hour? You think they got an hour into it and like, wait a second?
Yeah, do you think they picked up on the lesbian thing and that was what was so offensive to them?
Could have been, yeah. Could have been.
And
Adam and Eve, not Satin and Eve.
And so I scoured the internet and found one more 1-star review from a Conrad A. written this year, March 21st, year of our Lord. Seriously, why? Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Why must this movie be old-fashioned? Exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I don't like old-fashioned movies, exclamation mark. And it is in black and white movie. Boo. Stupid movie. 1 star. So I think I think Eric, you know where Conrad's coming from. Why is this movie also old-fashioned? Right?
There's a bit of truth to that. I'm not going to deny. What's his name? Margot?
Conrad A. Conrad.
Yeah, why should a movie that was released in 1950 be old-fashioned? It should be super modern and techie. Like, it should have awesome CGI effects, for sure. Why would they make it without CGI effects? That's pretty dumb.
There were some CGI effects.
No, some awful rear projection. That was insultingly bad. I don't defend that. That was shockingly awful.
The one scene where they tried to do special effects, and it is comically terrible.
Instead of a location shoot.
Yeah, usually we see that with cars.
Couldn't they pay for just...
you guys are focusing on the wrong things, really.
I love the movie. It was just a bad sequence. I'm not defending. Like, they couldn't film them walking down the street.
I was trying to figure out, like, how they filmed that. So obviously they're just walking in place?
Yeah, he's just picking his leg.
Yeah, it's like the scenes we usually see with them driving, right? They're sitting in a fake...
Right, and they're just like Batman driving,
projecting
the Batmobile,
stock footage behind them.
No, right, but so they're not actually moving even. They're just miming like they're moving.
Yeah, it was stupid. It was shockingly dumb. I don't know. I have no defense of that sequence. It was terrible.
Well, I didn't see any critics make note of that.
Did you guys know the first time you saw this movie that Eve was pulling the strings and she was kind of pretending to be who she was? Did you know that the first time?
I did
Absolutely not. No.
When did you first discover that was what was happening? The first time you saw it?
I think we realized how nasty it was probably in the bathroom scene. That's where
the bathroom scene is when she says it.
That's where, right. I think that's at least... this was a decade ago, so let me be clear. My memory is not going to be very precise with the exact moment I realized Eve was duplicitous.
For me, it was in the bathroom scene, and I was quite shocked by it.
What about you? Did you know that she was evil?
What's it? Birdie? Birdie.
Hated her.
Yeah, hated her. And
I thought it was because she was jealous, because she was taking up some of her spot.
I actually picked, not to toot my own horn, but I picked up on that she was more of a...
That's Eric tooting his own horn.
A nod to the audience. Like, hey, watch out. This is not... You got to pay attention to this shit because it's probably not real.
I think that's well spotted. I mean, I noticed it this time around that this was very clearly foreshadowing. This character came in and was like, okay, all we're missing is just these wolves chasing her off stage.
And when I watched it again, it was great.
Birdie was annoying as shit. I was like, what is this lady's deal? Like, why is she so upset about this shit? And it's obvious that we'll pay attention to it because, it ends up being
she's
important.
just a crusty...
It made no sense in the movie. It's like, well, everybody else loves Eve. Why are you being such a fucking stick in the mud? What's your problem? And obviously it's because, Eve ends up being a con artist, basically.
Yeah. She definitely alerts alerted Eric to it.
Well spotted. Good job, man.
Thank you.
Proud of you. Well, should we wrap this thing up, fellas?
Was this old movie good, Ben?
I think it was great. I think it was phenomenal.
I enjoyed it. I felt it was entertaining. I did not feel it was old-fashioned. In fact, I felt it held up incredibly well 67 years later. I can't think of a movie that's made today that...
Yeah.
Eric?
I liked parts of it. I liked some of the core, the center, the gooey center of the movie.
Yeah, the most important part of it
the
is...
The crust of it was, I thought, pretty hard to... That was boring.
All right.
All right, well, thanks everybody for listening to Our Old Movies Good. Website's in the works. It will be www.ouroldmoviesgood.com. You can email us at ouroldmoviesgood@gmail.com if you have movie suggestions, criticisms of our opinions, corrections to make, or you just want to be a troll. We're at the stage of our career, we're happy to have trolls. Trolls are welcome. So
I think Eric's a troll.
Yeah, he could be. Maybe this is just a massive troll job. Troll job. Goodness. Wow, that was hard to get out. But yeah, thanks everybody for listening. Again, Our Old Movies Good. This is Ben with Eric and Kevin signing out. Thanks.